Some of the most shocking stories in history didn't start in newspapers or courtrooms. They started as whispers, rumors that sounded so outrageous, so impossible, that anyone who believed them was written off as paranoid or unstable. But then something happened. Documents got declassified. Whistleblowers came forward. Senate hearings put government officials under oath, and the unthinkable became undeniable. By the end of this video,
in 1932, the United States Public Health Service began a study of the effects of untreated syphilis on black men in Macon County, Alabama. Participants' informed consent was not collected. The study initially involved 600 black men, 399 with syphilis, 201 who did not have the disease. Researchers told the men they were being treated for bad blood, a local term used to describe several ailments, including syphilis, anemia, and fatigue. In exchange for taking part in the study, the men received free medical exams, free meals, and burial insurance.
You'll know exactly how the United States government lied to its own people, ran secret experiments on unwitting citizens, and covered up crimes at the highest levels of power, and how every single one of these stories was eventually proven true. We're starting with the cases that shocked the medical world, then moving into the halls of power, and saving the most disturbing program for last. For decades, people who claimed the government was secretly experimenting on American citizens were dismissed. They were called conspiracy theorists, told to put on their tinfoil hats and stop watching so many movies. But in one of the most shameful chapters in the history of American medicine, those people were right. It began in 1932. The United States Public Health Service launched a study in Macon County, Alabama. The official goal was to observe the natural progression of untreated syphilis in African American men. But the men enrolled in the study were never told that. They were told they were being treated for something called bad blood, a vague local phrase that covered everything from fatigue to anemia. They trusted the doctors. They had no reason not to. 399 men were enrolled and deliberately denied proper care. Researchers watched them get sicker. They documented the damage syphilis did to the human body over time. They wrote papers and reports, and they kept going. Then came 1943. Penicillin had been identified as an effective treatment for syphilis. By 1943, it was becoming a standard part of medical care across the country. A straightforward injection could have stopped the disease in its tracks for these men. But the Public Health Service made a deliberate decision. The participants were not informed. They were not treated. The study continued as if penicillin had never been discovered. For nearly 3 more decades, the experiment kept going. The men were tracked, examined, and monitored. Some were offered burial insurance as an incentive to stay enrolled. Over 100 of them died from syphilis-related causes. Wives were infected. Children were born with congenital syphilis. And through all of it, the government said nothing. The study finally ended in 1972, not because officials had a change of conscience, but because a public health service whistleblower named Peter Buxton leaked information to the press. Once the story broke, the public was outraged. Congressional hearings followed. New federal regulations around informed consent in medical research were put in place, but no one involved in the study was ever criminally charged. 25 years later, in 1997, President Bill Clinton stood
do unto you.
That's enough.
There was an obsession with leaks. You don't blame the leaks when facts come out that are showing wrongdoing.
No, there will be no picture.
This is the funny thing. Had it not been for Watergate, I think this man could have gone down in history as one of the more significant presidents in the history of this country.
Out. You don't have to stay, do you?
We were witnessing the implosion of an American presidency.
The president has taken his place at the table in the White House where he's going to speak. Here now, the next picture will be the President of the United States.
I have never been a quitter.
in the White House and formally apologized to the surviving participants and their families. He called what happened deeply, morally wrong. By that point, only 8 of the original participants were still alive. The Tuskegee syphilis study is now taught in medical schools and bioethics courses around the world. It fundamentally changed the rules around how human research is conducted, but it only changed those rules because the truth finally came out. For 40 years, the government's position was that none of this was happening. That same pattern, deny, deflect, and cover up until the walls cave in, played out on a much more public stage just 2 years later. By the early 1970s, Richard Nixon was one of the most powerful men on Earth. He had won the 1972 presidential election in a landslide, carrying 49 of 50 states. His approval ratings were high. His political position looked unassailable. And then, a group of men broke into an office building in Washington. On June 17, 1972, 5 men were arrested inside the headquarters of the Democratic National Committee at the Watergate complex. They had been caught attempting to photograph documents and plant listening devices. At first, the Nixon administration dismissed the incident as a third-rate burglary. Press Secretary Ron Ziegler called the coverage, at the time, shabby journalism. Nixon himself went on television and told the American public directly, "I am not a crook." But 2 reporters at the Washington Post, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, kept digging. Guided by a secret source known only as Deep Throat, whose identity wasn't publicly confirmed until 2005, they traced the money and the decision-making back to the White House itself. What started as a burglary story became something far bigger. It revealed a coordinated effort by Nixon's administration to spy on political opponents, obstruct justice, and conceal the truth from investigators, the press, and the American people. The cover-up unraveled piece by piece. It turned out Nixon had installed a secret recording system in the Oval Office. When investigators demanded the tapes, Nixon refused to hand them over. His Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General both resigned rather than carry out his order to fire the special prosecutor. That weekend in October of 1973 became known as the Saturday Night Massacre. Eventually, the tapes were handed over, and one of them contained an 18.5-minute gap that his secretary claimed was an accidental erasure. Investigators were not convinced. Nixon resigned on August 9, 1974, becoming the only United States president in history to do so. The Watergate Special Prosecution Force later reported that over $60 million in public funds were spent on investigations connected to the scandal. Dozens of government officials were indicted. Several went to prison. The word Watergate itself became shorthand for political betrayal and government deception. Every major political scandal since then gets a gate attached to its name. That linguistic habit says everything about how deeply the scandal cut into American trust in government. But if Watergate was the conspiracy theory about what politicians do with power, the next story is about something far darker. What happens when a government agency decides that human beings are acceptable test subjects? The Central Intelligence Agency is no stranger to accusations of wrongdoing. But even by the standards of Cold War-era intelligence operations, what happened under the program known as MKUltra was something different. When people in the 1960s whispered that the CIA was secretly drugging Americans and experimenting on their minds, they were laughed at. The idea seemed like science fiction. It was not science fiction. MKUltra was launched in the early 1950s. The CIA was deeply worried about communist brainwashing techniques, particularly after the Korean War, when American prisoners of war appeared to have been psychologically manipulated. The agency wanted its own methods. It wanted to know if a human being's mind could be controlled, broken down, and rebuilt. Dr. Sidney Gottlieb headed the program. Under his direction, the CIA poured an estimated $25 million into research and operations over the course of the program's lifespan, According to United States congressional hearings, that money funded experiments across at least 80 institutions, including universities, hospitals, and prisons. Most of the people involved had no idea they were part of a government program. Informed consent was not part of the plan. The experiments included the administration of LSD and other hallucinogenic drugs to people without their knowledge. Subjects included prisoners, mental patients, and in some cases, ordinary members of the public. Researchers studied the effects of sleep deprivation, sensory isolation, psychological pressure, and combinations of drugs and hypnosis. The goal was to find a way to make a person say or believe anything the agency wanted them to. The results were often catastrophic. Some subjects suffered severe psychological damage. Frank Olson, a government scientist, died after being given LSD without his knowledge. His death was initially ruled a suicide. His family spent decades fighting to have the circumstances properly investigated. The CIA did not come clean voluntarily. MKUltra's existence only became known because of a lucky accident. In 1973, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered the destruction of all MKUltra files. Most were shredded, but a batch of documents had been misfiled in a financial records building and survived the purge. In 1977, those surviving documents were discovered during a Freedom of Information Act request. Senate hearings followed that same year. The program's existence was confirmed publicly for the first time. Americans learned that their own intelligence agency had been running secret mind control experiments on unwitting citizens for over 2 decades. The public reaction was a mixture of outrage and disbelief. New federal regulations around research ethics were put in place. The hearings led to serious reforms in how government agencies could conduct experiments involving human subjects. Declassified documents related to MKUltra have continued to emerge in the years since. Each new release adds more detail to a picture that is already disturbing enough. Researchers, journalists, and historians are still piecing together the full scope of what happened, because so much of the original documentation was destroyed before anyone outside the agency knew to look for it. What connects the Tuskegee syphilis study, the Watergate scandal, and MKUltra is not just that they happened, it's how long they were allowed to continue. The Tuskegee study ran for 40 years. MKUltra ran for over 2 decades. Watergate might never have ended in resignation if not for a secret recording system the president installed himself. In each case, the people who raised alarms were ignored, dismissed, or silenced until the evidence became impossible to suppress. That pattern matters because it means the gap between a theory and a proven fact is often not about whether something is plausible. It's about whether the right document survives, whether the right person decides to talk, or whether 2 reporters at a Washington newspaper keep pulling on the same thread long enough for the whole thing to unravel. The 3 stories covered in this video are among the most well-documented examples of government deception in American history. They are backed by congressional hearings, declassified records, presidential apologies, criminal indictments, and decades of investigative reporting. They are not theories anymore. They are history. And history has a habit of reminding us that the most important question is not whether a claim sounds believable. It's whether anyone is brave enough to keep asking questions until the answer finally comes out. Subscribe for more documentaries covering history, geopolitics, and the stories that were hidden in plain sight.